the food is delicious. He asks the man if he can tell him about the monsters that appeared in the mountains. Isabel tastes food and says it is weird. The old man says, "Oh my goodness." The old man asks if he will go even if he dies. Locust seems determined to go. The old man says he cannot sleep well tonight. They finish their food. The old man shows them a picture and tries to tell them something. They listen to him carefully. Isabel says that though she has made up her mind to hear that the way is that dangerous, she is having second thoughts. Locust says to the old man that they are thankful for the guidance. He asks him how much will he charge for that. The old man says there is no need for that. He says he will add it to their tab. He asks them to come back alive and pay for that. Locust asks if his business works well like this. The older man says he always hears this. Locust says thanks to the old man and adds the food was delicious. He says the special sausages nailed it. The old man says the place is known for its trash food except for the beer. The old man says he will remember both of them. He says he will prepare tastier food for them next time. Locust looks at the old man and says he cannot wait for the next time. They leave the place. They walk toward the mountains in the darkness. The scene shifts to their fight with monsters. Both Isabel and Locust bravely fight against some ugly-looking monsters. Locust says the Hispania Mountains are worthy of their fame. They pass by horrible-looking old trees. Isabel says they have barely entered the mountains and the monsters are pouring out. She says now she understands why he brought her here. She says he wants to know a lot of things during training. He says she knows this is not the reason. He says she is wrong to think if she thinks he has come there for simply training. She asks him what the reason behind that is. He looks at her and says they are going to Schweizer's dungeon. Isabel asks him if they are going to the dungeon, which Schweizer, the sage, created. She says the dungeon is rumored to give one the strength to rule the world when one finds it. She asks him if it is just a legend or if there is any truth in it. He says, knowing Schweizer's personality, the dungeon must not be a cave or anything like that. Isabel asks, knowing what? Locust gets lost in the memories of the past time. He remembers the time when he was with Schweizer. In the memory, Schweizer tells Locust about the mountains that pierce through the clouds. At its peak, there is a beautiful lake. There is an island on the lake. He says he will wait for him there. Locust comes out of his memories. He says the peak must be the summit of the mountains called Drake Mountain. He says the lake must be volcanogenic. He says it is a location that he would have loved. He says they need to find an island there. Locust says it is not an exaggeration to call it a legend as it is extremely dangerous. Isabel thinks he should be at least a 6-star to challenge it. He says he only needs a month to reach the stage of 6-star. Isabel asks him if he is sane to think that. She says no matter how hard he may try, it will take him a dozen years to reach 6-star. He asks her to find a proper place to train. He says she should also focus and find some safe place where they can sit and concentrate on mana. He asks her if she is listening to him. She thinks about the time when they defeated the monster just after entering the mountains. She says she will get used to fighting against the monsters gradually while staying in the mountains. She asks him what he is looking at attentively. He says he found it. He says he found a place. She follows his gaze. They reach a spot near a waterfall. Isabel says this is such an amazing sight to look at. They go inside a cave near that waterfall. Locust creates a light out of his magic. He adjusts it at the top of the place. He says this is the place where they will be training till the next month. Isabel opens her bag. He calls Isabel. He says from today onwards, he will be showing her the battling method that she wants to learn. Isabel claps and asks him if it is true. He says yes. He says he is warning her. He says the reason why he was telling her before is that it is a dangerous technique. He tells her that she can lose her life if she will copy it incorrectly. He says that is why she should only observe. Locust opens his hand and light emits out of his hand. He sits and rises in the air. A magical aura surrounds him with glowing lights. Isabel opens her mouth with surprise. The magical energy flows along with the waterfall outside the cave. Soon, the place of waterfall starts glowing with lights. The energy from the outside begins to flow into Locust body. Locust sits silent with eyes closed and full concentration. The energy keeps flowing inside his boy. Isabel says he is absorbing main from the whole of the Hispania Mountains. She wonders if he is gathering mana to the very limit of the mana room in his abdomen. The energy keeps flowing with the running waterfall and keeps coming inside the cave. Locust-Traman opens his eyes and says with this, the preparations are finished. He looks at Isabel. With her closed eyes, open arms, and full concentration, she is also absorbing light from the outside. Locust-Traman again closes his eyes. He says he has his predictions about her. He says, but who knows if her talent will surpass his estimation. He admits that she has a strong passion for learning. Isabel opens her eyes and finds him looking at her. She asks him what he is doing. He touches her and says she is a pretty impressive girl. Isabel looks at him. He asks her to eat something now. Locust-Traman opens the magic space bag. He looks at the things available inside it. He takes out the required things. He asks Isabel to eat something. She says she is not feeling hungry. She asks him to save the food for later use. He tells her that her brain is misinterpreting the feeling of mana repletion as satiety. He again offers her food. He asks her to force the food down. They both sit on their mats and eat food. She says until recently, she had never imagined spending time with him like this. She says she has always been observing him and his unordinary willpower. She tells him that he was only bullied by the other students, but her eyes were drawn to him. She says she does not think she was attracted to his aura or the spirit. She says she does not know how to say it. She says, but when she sees him these days, he looks like a different person. She says she does not know why, but it seems like he knows where he has to go. She says he does not have the slightest hesitation. He asks her which one she thinks is real. She laughs and says that both versions look real. She says humans do not change, they only grow. She says either way, she wants to thank him for the change. Isabel says he had not brought her with him previously. She says now when she thinks that only two of them are going to live in that cave for the whole month. She still needs to finish her sentence. Locust-Traman intervened and said he told her that he was not interested in kids. He asks her not to worry about the useless things. Isabel closes her eyes and asks why she feels so displeased to hear this. Locust-Traman creates a pattern on the wall with the help of magic. Isabel asks him what he is doing. He tells her that he is setting up a barrier. He says it will be a pain for the monsters to come in when they are asleep. He says he is off. He says since it is their first day, she should also get plenty of sleep. She looks at him when he is sleeping. She says she knows it is a relief to know that he has no interest in her, but she still wants to punch him badly. She also falls asleep. She opens her eyes and looks at him. Locust-Traman sits on the mat. She asks him if he is awake. She asks him how long she has been asleep. He tells her she slept for 5 hours. He asks her to think of that as her last break. He tells her that today, they will start the real training. He tells her that now they will practice Chaos Sajan's method. He says they are going to start battling today. He says he is repeating it, which is an extremely dangerous method. He asks her not to imitate him. He advises her to observe him. He starts meditation. Soon, his hair starts to flicker in the air. A mixture of fire and water begins to move in his abdomen. Isabel wonders if he separates the mana gathered into fire and water attributes. She observes the method closely. She notices that the contradictory mana is fighting and keeping a check on each other. She says it is almost as if a war is being fought in the body. Aura of water element drips out of Locust-Traman's eyes. His whole body seems split apart. It is a fight between water and fire. The next moment, fire flames lash out of his eyes. He says, as per the method, one has to maintain a balance so that none of the elements can dominate the other one. He says it is like stabilizing a balance between the elements that cannot align. Isabel looks surprised. She says it is an amazing method. She says this is the method of battling. She takes a deep breath and closes her eyes. She starts to imitate Locust-Traman. Soon, a ball of fire and water appear out of her. The ball begins to move. She soon feels uneasy. She vomits and leans down in pain. She coughs badly. She says there is just a little disturbance with the balance, but it is the reason behind immense pain. She thinks he is teaching a nonsense method similar to simple meditation. The scene jumps and a few days pass. Isabel takes a bath in the waterfall. She adds a stone into a pattern. She says 2 weeks have passed, but Frey has not moved even an inch. She asks when he will stop practicing that terrifying method. She crosses the barriers created by Locust-Traman and enters the cave. She notices him, who is still meditating and seeking mana. She sees something that makes her surprise. Isabel says the mana is getting materialized. She says that means he is going to become a 6-star. She says he reached that stage in 1 month. Then she remembered something and corrected that he had reached that stage in 2 weeks. She says this is unbelievable. She says this is the first time she has seen such inconvincible growth. She says the method is slow but efficiently works. She sits before him and starts to imitate him again. The light again starts to emit out of her. A ball of fire and water again appears. It starts to rain cats and dogs outside the cave. But they keep contrasting the method of battling. Isabel again starts to cough. She feels weak and uncomfortable. She says the balance is disturbed by the slightest lapse in concentration. She says her growth speed is unbelievable. She says this is Kasijan's method of battling. She wonders if their ancestors practiced that ferocious method. This is why current mages cannot reach the heights of the past mages. She feels a strange smell. She sniffed herself to check if she smelled bad. Isabel notices that the barriers are breaking. She says it means there is an intruder. Soon, the barrier breaks and a terrible thing enters the cave with a stark light. Isabel cannot take her eyes off. She tries to identify what that thing is. She says, "What is this?" Locust Traman opens his eyes and looks at the creature. He says that it is a phoenix. Isabel asks him if he is not the legendary creature and divine beast. Locust Traman looks at the phoenix. He says he knew that there were all sorts of monsters in the Hispania Mountains. He says he never thought. Even a phoenix could also be found here. Locust Traman says the fire attribute mana of the battling method attracts it. He comes close to the giant bird named Phoenix. However, Isabel moves back from the phoenix. Locust Traman asks Phoenix to come close to him. Isabel says it is dangerous. She says Denive beasts cannot be tamed by humans. Phoenix stares at them. Locust Traman asks Phoenix if he will stare and would not come closer to ask for help. Isabella asks him not to do this. Phoenix comes close to Locust Traman and touches his beak with him. Locust Traman pats on Phoenix's head. He touches his flame features. Isabel says it is unbelievable that he feels Phoenix's flame features with his bare hands. Locust Traman says he is doing so because Phoenix is not showing hostility to him. He asks her not to blind her eyes because he is a divine beast. He asks her to watch the wounds made by big claws on Phoenix. He says Phoenix had almost got his heart gouged out. He says it is a miracle that he is alive. Isabel looks at Phoenix and asks if they can die. Locust Traman says they are less constrained by death than the other creatures. He adds, but that does not mean that they are immortal. Phoenix lays down on the ground. Locust Traman says sometimes that could inflict such a wound on a divine beast lurking in the mountains. Locust Traman again pats Phoenix and says it looks like he has fought an overwhelming opponent. Phoenix stands up. Locust Traman says he will help him. Locust Traman puts his hand on the Phoenix and closes his eyes. He creates a magical aura to treat Phoenix. Phoenix seems calm and at ease. Isabel says Phoenix is behaving like a chick. Locust Traman opens his eyes and tells Phoenix that he is taking away the fruit of his training. Phoenix makes a cooing sound. Locust Traman says he is just joking. He asks him to stay calm as the recovery process is about to be over. He feels satisfied to help Phoenix and smiles. Isabel wondered if he could also wear expressions like this. Isabel says not only the expressions, but even his speech has been changed. She says he is vastly different from the person he knows. She feels the surrounding air has also become peaceful. They come out of the cave. He says it is nice and chill today. He tells Phoenix not to say he cannot fly because of the rain. He says brave Phoenix does not feel weak by the drizzle. Phoenix makes cooing sounds and tries to answer him. Locust Traman says Phoenix has got quite a character. He asks him to let's race to the mountain top. He says the loser must strive for the lunch. They both take a plunge. Locust Traman says to Phoenix that he cannot talk like a human. He adds if he wants to strive, he flips his wings with full power. He again pats on the Phoenix and says it is quite nostalgic. He says to the Phoenix that he behaves like his friend. The Phoenix's wounds begin to recover. Isabel asks if the Phoenix regains his healing powers by recovering his energy. The Phoenix recovers completely and flickers his wings with joy. Locust Traman says to the Phoenix that he is thankful to him for making him remember old memories. He puts his hand on the Phoenix and advises him to choose his opponent wisely from now onwards. The Phoenix looks at Locust Traman and flies towards the sky. Locust Traman and Isabel enter the cave. He notices something in the ground. He sees that it is Phoenix's feature. Locust Traman tells Isabel they can use Phoenix's features to heal an injury or produce magic. He tells her that the feature can fetch a high price. He puts it into their bag. He says it seems that the Phoenix has repaid his debt. He says the Phoenix is different from someone who cannot come forward to help the person who has shattered her for weeks. Isabel asks him if he is talking about her. She asks him if he cannot speak nicely to the humans as well. Locust Traman ignores her question. He sits back on the mat and starts practicing again. Mana keeps flowing inside the cave. Time passes quickly. The stone signs outside the cave show that almost 4 weeks have passed. The scene moves inside the cave. Isabel looks at Locust Traman, who is still practicing the battling method. Locust Traman seems quite weak. Isabel says it looks like he is about to faint any time. She says he has not eaten anything and continued to practice for the past week. She says this is quite worrying. She notices his appearance and says his mysterious appearance looks like that of a divine master. She says though he acts like a disrespectful man, he is still an amazing person. She says sometimes he behaves with a cold-hearted and sharp demeanor. However, sometimes he acts gently and quietly. She says his vast historical knowledge and speech show a certain level of maturity and experience. Isabel says it sometimes feels like he is an old-age sage. She says he shows the depth of flawless mages. She looks at his majestic appearance. She was surprised by the words Great Mage. She says she does not know why, but sometimes recalls the Great Mage Locust Traman when she looks at him. She thinks it might be because she feels deep admiration and respect for him. Locust Traman moves his lips. Isabel notices that. She starts to observe him. He opens his eyes and stands up. Isabel says he succeeded in 1 month. She congratulates him for becoming a 6-star. He looks at his hands. His whole body seems luminous. The magical aura from his seems to spread around in the cave. Isabel looks at him and says this is an unbelievable scene. She comes close to him and says the youngest person to reach the 6-star stage was only 35. She says if people come to know that an academy trainee has reached a 6-star level, there would be a big uproar. Locust Traman closes his eyes and breathes slowly. He thinks now he can gather mana by simply breathing. Locust Traman loses his balance and is about to collapse. Isabel holds him. He says his body is in a mess because he starved for a week. She asks him if he needs some beef. He asks her to go on a hunt. He says he wants some oily food in his stomach. She asks if he is fine. He asks her what she thinks she is talking to. They come out of the cave. They found many monsters lying dead on the ground. Locust Traman says it must be the Phoenix rascal behind that. He scratches his head and says no wonder he did not sense any monster while meditating. Isabel says it looks like he was trying to protect them. Locust Traman remembers when he asked the Phoenix if he was taking the fruit of his practice. He thinks the Phoenix should not have taken his words to heart. He says they will meet again if destiny allows them. He says it looks like there is no need to hunt. He asks Isabel to move toward Schweizer's dungeon after eating. They start to move back to the cave. They hear a voice. They feel it is the human voice. Isabel says it is not coming from a distance. She adds the person must be somewhere near them. Locust Traman says he is starving, but he has to go. He makes a magical circle in the air and jumps up. Isabel calls him back. She stands alone over there and says what she is supposed to do now. The scene shifts to another place in the mountains. A wounded man cries and asks for help. 2 men are tied with ropes. They have many knives thrust into their bodies. They seem dead. A wild-looking man stands in front of the crying man. There are other men like him. One of the men says to the tied man that their aim is a piece of shit. He laughs and asks the man why they call themselves the platoon leader of the Skulax bandits. Another man asks if he is not embarrassed to be seen. He asks the man named Huan to shut up. He says he is going to hunt the man. Huan calls him Alex and asks him to stay away. Huan says it is his turn to hunt. The vice captain calls them dimwits and asks them to move on. They say to the vice captain Lawrence that they will have the last throw. Huan again says it is his turn to win now. The vice captain thinks while eating, when will the women pass by here? He says it is almost a month. He says until when they need to be cooped up in these irritating mountains. He looks at the fire and keeps thinking about that. Huan takes out his knife and aims at the man. He asks his fellows to watch. He says he will stab him in the forehead. The tied man cries to see this. Huan throws the knife toward the man and says it is a 10-point hit. The knife moves quickly. The man shouts with fear. The man closes his eyes. A magically formed circle appears in front of the man. The knife moves back and falls to the ground. The wild people seem surprised to see this. One of them says, "What is this?" Alex laughs and holds Huan's shoulder. He says even the wind is not in his favor. Huan says this is annoying. He asks Alex to pick up a knife and go. He says the vice captain is calling already. Alex turns back and sees Locust Trauman. Alex says he has surprised him. Alex asks who he is. The other men take out their knives and look at Locust Trauman angrily. One of them says the dude is either about to die or is already dead. Locust Trauman stands silent. He looks at the dead men. He understands that they are playing darts with living humans. Locust Trauman says it seems like they are enjoying it here. One of the men says the corpse talks. Locust Trauman punches the man and starts to move in the air like a lifeless object. This seems shocking for the other men. The scene appears unbelievable to them. The vice captain keeps busy eating. He is ignorant of the chaotic situation. Locust Trauman moves his hand with the help of magic and takes Alex's head off his shoulders. Alex's torn body falls to the ground. The blood spills in the air. His magical aura spreads in the air. The vice captain tries to determine the level of the fighter. The vice captain thinks he is a 5-star mage. He identifies that the opponent is using the light scathy spell. Locust Trauman comes toward the remaining men. He says hello to them and says it is time for a lesson. Isabel reaches the place after searching for Locust Trauman everywhere. She stops for a moment to see him among dead people. She comes close to him and asks if he killed all of them. He tells her he let one of them escape with a tracking magic on him. They come close to a dead body. Locust Trauman tells Isabel that they were calling that man their vice captain. He says that means there must be a captain somewhere. She asks him if he is planning to annihilate them. He says he cannot act if nothing happens when these people are killing innocent people. Locust Trauman thinks that the demigod enjoys humans hating and killing each other. He thinks he likes to see human beings being degenerated. He says if it is so, he will mess up his entertainment. Locust Trauman says no matter how insignificant it is, he says it sickens him to imagine that something makes the demigod happy. The man tied to the tree asks him if he saved his life. He says to the man that, unfortunately, he has not lost a big amount of blood. He adds they are under no obligation to take him with them. The man cries and says he begs their mercy. He says he cannot die like this. Isabel looks at the man. The man cries badly and says he wants to apologize to his father before dying. The man who manages to escape reaches his captain. He tells the captain that a ghost saved the 3rd platoon. The captain thinks for a moment. The captain asks the man if he has drunk the whole barrel. The captain thinks the man is drunk, so he is talking nonsense. The man says he is not drunk and is telling him the truth. He tells the captain that he has seen the scenario with his eyes. The man tells the captain that the whitened hair of the ghost is scattering in the air. He says the skinny body of the ghost sticks like rot. The man tells Captain Karlst that the man is not an ordinary man. The man tells the captain that the man's mastery of battling in the mountains did not allow them to fight back. He adds that the man takes the head of one of their men off his shoulder in no time. He says that he did that alone. He says that he is the only one who managed to escape. All these details make the captain think for a while. The captain says the man must be a mage. The yellow-haired man thinks it must be correct to guess. The yellow-haired man says that according to the circumstances, the man can double battle casting. The captain says it means that the man is a battle mage. The yellow-haired man says yes to this. He agrees with the captain. The captain stands up and instructs his subordinates to increase the lookouts. He asks the man to inform everyone whenever he looks at the ghost. After getting in a position to do this, he orders his subordinates to kill the ghost. The yellow-haired man asks the captain if there is a possibility that the Aqua Reed House has sent a mage. The captain says the prideful family of knights would never let a mage escort them. The captain says this is not a possibility. Captain Karlst asks the man if they are now playing darts on humans. The man jumps back with fear. He says he is sorry for doing this. He tells the captain that they are incredibly bored, so they think of playing darts. The captain asks the man whom they were using to play. The man puts his hand on his head to think for a moment. The man says he was just a random mercenary. He says to the captain that he knows that man. The captain asks if he is the one who came with a mother and child who wanted to collect some herbs from the mountains. The captain says that man is not capable of hiring a battle mage. The captain keeps thinking, who is this mage? The scene shifts. There is a broken cartridge lying on the ground. Many dead soldiers are lying around. There is a battle to carry on. The remaining soldiers are fighting with Captain Karlst's men. Captain Karlst looks at them and asks them not to look at him like this, or he will lose motivation. Captain Karlst laughs and asks the girl if she knows he has been searching for her for the last month. He says she is the eldest daughter of the famous Aqua Reed house, Sonia Aqua Reed. 3 men attach Sonia Aqua Reed with weapons. She is alone. She manages to block their attack successfully. She strikes them back and makes them fly back like mere things. She swings her sword in the air and takes the head of one of the men off his shoulders in no time. She stops for a moment to breathe. She again takes hold of her sword against the yellow-haired man. The captain seems amused to look at her. The yellow-haired man attacks her. Sonia Aqua Reed blocks his attack. The man smiles. The yellow-haired man strikes her so hard and makes and jumps in the air. However, she managed to get a grip on herself by thrusting her sword into the ground. She gets balance with the help of her sword. The captain mocks her struggles. He says he is about to fall in love with her to see this. He says it is impressive that she still has not taken her hands off the sword. Captain Karlst says that the rumors about the noble flame sword are not fake. He says that means there is no exaggeration about these things. The captain stands with his group on one side, while Sonia Aqua Reed stands on the opposite. 2 maids standing behind her call her name and cry. There is an aged warrior who looks tired. He also calls her name. Sonia Aqua Reed thinks about something. The maids cry badly with fear. The old warrior named Luther takes a heavy breath. Captain Karlst looks at her lustfully. He says it looks like it is worth waiting for her for a month in these infuriating mountains. He says Sonia Aqua Reed is as beautiful as the rumors about her. Captain Karlst continues to talk. He says he has heard she is the eldest daughter of the famous family of knights. He adds he has also heard that she is as talented as any male heir. Captain Karlst says he has also heard that she is a genius knight who won the title of the Rainstorm at the mere age of 18. Sonia Aqua Reed looks back and sees that their escorting soldiers are all annihilated. She thinks only the maids and Sir Luther remain. She thinks Sir Luther has been retired for a long time. He says that means only she is left as capable of fighting. She looks at the opposite side. She says there are more than 20 people in her opposition. She thinks all of the opponents are skilled men. She says this is a worst-case scenario. Captain Karlst says he is curious about one thing. He asks Sonia Aqua Reed where his escort mage is. Sonia Aqua Reed says what sort of bullshit he is talking about. She asks him if he thinks that a famous family of knights with such a long history would use a mage to escort them. She says all the magicians are weaklings these days. The captain says he is right to think that the man who interfered with his underlings is not involved with Aqua Reeds. Captain Karlst says his subordinate told him the man is a ghost. He wonders what sort of man he would be. Captain Karlst ignores these thoughts. He says to Sonia Aqua Reed that they will not kill her right away. Sonia Aqua Reed asks him what he means by this. Captain Karlst licks his lips lustfully and asks her what she thinks. He says it is very necessary to spell it out in this situation. He tells Sonia Aqua Reed that guys like them now can play with a noblewoman like her. He says this is such a rare occasion. Sonia Aqua Reed clenches her teeth and asks why he is saying such nonsense. Sonia Aqua Reed thinks she would rather bite her tongue than become their plaything. Captain Karlst says her death would not change the situation. They say if she dies, they will try their hand on the women standing behind her. The maids cry to hear this. Captain Karlst says they have been living like beggars for a month to get her. He says his boys are quite hungry now. He says they would not be able to kill them nicely. Sonia Aqua Reed gets mad to hear this. She thinks this is the reason why they kept these women alive. The maids hold each other. They cry and say they will not drag their lady down. Sir Luther says it would be an honor to die for Lady Sonia. Sonia Aqua Reed looks at Sir Luther to console him. She releases a heavy breath. She addresses his subordinates and says she is sorry for making them miserable because of the incapability of their master. The maids say this is upsetting to hear. They ask her not to say so. They say they grew up healthy because of the help of the respectable Aqua Reed family. Sonia Aqua Reed closes her eyes to gather the courage to face the situation. The maids say they implore their lady. They ask her to end their lives with her hands. They say it would be dishonorable for them to meet their lady in heaven after becoming the playthings of these people. Sonia Aqua Reed says alright. She asks them to let their heads high and their chests straight with pride as they reunite in heaven. Captain Karlst tries to stop them. He asks his subordinates what they are going to do. Sonia Aqua Reed raises her sword and says, in honor of two maidens and honor of Aqua Reed House. She says she, Sonia Aqua Reed, gratefully escorts their new journey to heaven. Captain Karlst orders his underlings to stop her right away. Sonia Aqua Reed is about to take off the heads of the maiden to save them from Captain Karlst and his men. She opens her eyes fill with tears. The maid's eyes are also filled with tears. Sonia Aqua Reed looks at her hands and notices that her sword has disappeared. She says her sword has been stolen. She thinks, when did the Skull Axe bandits become skilled in removing her sword from her hands? She looks at her empty hands and says in the end, she suffered the worst humiliation for a night. Sonia Aqua Reed says she is sorry for not being able to give them an honorable death. The maids cry over their miserable state of being. Sonia Aqua Reed says she, the eldest daughter of the Aqua Reed family, orders them to bite their tongues. Captain Karlst looks at someone and says so he finally reveals himself. Sonia Aqua Reed looks beside her. She looks at the boy who is standing with her sword in hand. Sonia Aqua Reed calls him a ghost. Everyone looks at him with mixed expressions of fear and awe. Isabel gives support to the mercenary. Captain Karlst laughs and says he has heard a lot about him. He says it looks like he took care of his boys. Locust Trauman throws the sword towards Sonia Aqua Reed and asks Captain Karlst if he is the leader. Sonia Aqua Reed catches her sword. Locust Trauman and Captain Karlst give each other a look. Captain Karlst raises his finger toward the sky and asks Locust Trauman if he has come from there. He says that is where their base camp is located. Captain Karlst gets mad at him and asks him what he did to his men. Locust Trauman smiles and says he knows he has taken good care of them. Captain Karlst clenches his teeth and gets mad at Locust Trauman. He orders his men to kill him immediately. He says they cannot give them the time to use magic. He tells his men that, according to the estimate, he is a battle mage. The men think that the power of the battle mage is obvious. They say they can easily defeat their number. Locust Trauman closes his eyes and creates a strong magic aura around him. He fights with Captain Karlst's men with his strong magical powers. Captain Karlst blocks his attack with the help of the sword. He feels difficulty to stop the attack. He notices something and asks what is this power of fire in the magical aura. Captain Karlst's men move in the air like mere objects. They seem like lifeless objects before Locust Trauman. There occurs an explosion. Sonia Aqua Reed asks them who they are and what their purpose is. Isabel smiles and asks her to stay at ease. She tells her that they are not their enemies. Captain Karlst attacks Locust Trauman and says he knows a little about battle mages. He says in the end, they are still magicians. He says he can only use his magic for a short period. He says there is a certain spell cycle. He says the way he casts magic spells, it seems he is his sole target. He says those are some of the impressive skills. Captain Karlst says it appears that he is a musclehead. He says he will till when he can cast strong magic spells. He says he will get exhausted. He says let's see for how long he can deceive his men's weapons. Captain Karlst passes an evil smile and says whatever it will be, soon his head will be flying in the air. He straightens his sword and aims at Locust Trauman. Locust Trauman knocks down many men with a single blow. Captain Karlst says it is impossible to see this. He wonders how he is casting all these attacks at the same time. He tells how he is managing to deal with all the people simultaneously. Captain Karlst says using such strong magic for a long period is impossible. He says he has never heard of anything like this. He fails to defeat Locust Trauman and falls back to the ground. He sighs with pain and begs mercy from Locust Trauman. He asks him to stop attacking. All the mess seem tired of fighting. They cough badly and try to gather their strength. Captain Karlst notices Locust Trauman and says he is stopping attacking. He addresses his men and says he is out of mana. He orders his men to attack and kill him. He says if they do not kill him now, all of them will die. All the men stand up and try to gather strength. Sonia Aqua Reed asks Locust Trauman if he depleted his mana. She says she will help him in the fight. Locust Trauman asks Sonia Aqua Reed to avoid it because it is dangerous. Locust Traman creates a magical formation in the air with the movement of his hand. He again attacks all the men with a strong magical spell. Captain Carls says, "What the hell is this?" He says the earth is shaking. There appear to be big cracks in the ground. They wonder if it is an earthquake. One of the men shouts he is falling into the ground. They all get stuck in the cracks. They ask for help. Captain Carls cries with pain. He says he does not want to die. He asks them to save him. Sonia Aqua Reed says it is unbelievable that he annihilated them. She says the earthquake should be a spell of a 5-star mage. She asks him how he managed it while dealing with the mercenaries. Isabel tells her that the previous attacks were just deviations to buy time for this spell. Sonia Aqua Reed asks if the storm of light arrows was just a diversion. She says she has never heard of such casts and spells in double casting. Isabel says she had also not heard about these spells until she met him. Sonia Aqua Reed looks surprised to hear that. She asks if this is battle magic. She says she pays her gratitude for their help. She tells them that she is Sonai Aqua Reed of Lighnovel Kingdom. Locust Traman introduces himself as Frey Blake. He hears the word Aqua Reed and tries to remember where he heard that name. Sonia Aqua Reed asks if he will show no courtesy. Locust Traman says she is also not being courteous either. Isabel says she says sorry on his behalf. She says he still needs to gain more experience in terms of manners. She introduces herself. She says she is Isabel Transnine. Locust Traman asks what is wrong with his manners. Sonia Aqua Reed asks if he thinks he is being polite. She holds her nose to avoid the smell coming from Locust Aqua Reed. Isabel asks him if he cannot be half as gentle as he was with the phoenix. Sir Luther says he does not look like a beggar. He asks if he is a barbarian or a hermit who has secluded himself in the mountains. Isabel asks Locust Traman to watch his mouth. He ignores her. Sir Luther says he is the son of Bleak House. Sonia Aqua Reed asks Sir Luther if he knows him. He tells Sonia Aqua Reed that Bleak House is one of the houses with a highly noble lineage that maintains the Caste Cow Empire. He further says that the Bleak family's current head is Sir Asaka Bleak. He adds that Asaka Bleak is one of the 8 7-star mages. He says Isaac Bleak is also head of 6 magic towers. Sonia Aqua Reed wonders how such a noble person's appearance can be that haggard. Locust Traman stops Isabel, who is about to say something. He asks them where they are heading. Sir Luther replies they will lead to the city first. He says he has heard that there is a city nearby called Uspania. Locust Traman says they have visited that place. He says they can guide them about the place. Sir Luther asks if it is true. He says he is thankful for the help. Sir Luther again thanked them and said they must gather their soldiers' bodies first. He says it will take a while to gather the dead bodies of the knights. He asks them to take their leave first. Locust Traman asks him if they will bury them here in the mountains. Sir Luther says they have no choice. He says they cannot transport all of them to the city. Locust Traman thinks he can take the dead bodies in the town for them. Sir Luther asks for clarification. Locust Traman raises all the dead bodies in the air with a movement of his hand. All of them except Isabel shout to see this. Then he also takes the piece of the broken cartridge in the air with the help of his hand movements. Sonia Aqua Reed cannot believe her eyes. The scene leaves her mouth open with awe. Locust Traman gathers all the dead bodies in the cartridge. He asks Sir Luther if they are ready to go. Sir Luther says they are ready. The maids smile peacefully. They start their journey toward the city. Sonia Aqua Reed says he is only 20, but it looks like he is at least 30 years old. Locust Traman says who matters it is 20 or 30. He says it is nice to be young. Sonia Aqua Reed seems unable to comprehend his talks. She asks him what he is talking about. He ignores her question, and in any case, the mercenaries have been waiting for her since the beginning. He asks her if she knows why they were after her. He asks if she knows the reason behind that. Sonia Aqua Reed says if she thinks about their words. She tries to comprehend Captain Carlst's words. She says he told her they had been searching for her for 1 month. Sir Luther says if it is a month, then it is the same time they left Lighnovel. He says he cannot think of the culprit. He adds Aqua Reed has as many enemies as many allies. Sonia Aqua Reed says the mercenaries were quite skilled. She says they must be people with great strength since they managed to dispatch such skilled mercenaries. She smiles and says even though Frey Blake dealt with them so easily. She winks and asks how he works to get that much power and skill. She says she always thought that all the magicians were weak. She says that mindset is completely erased today. She says her skills and powers changed her perspective. Locust Traman says the answer to her question is quite obvious. He adds that the answer is effort. Sonia Aqua Reed looks at him with a confused expression. They reach the bridge near the location of the ships. There are boats and ships tied in the place. The members of the ship's crew try to push the cartridge full of dead bodies onto the ship. One of the maids hugs Sonia Aqua Reed. They send her to the kingdom with the dead bodies. They wave her goodbye. The night is about to come, and the sun sets. Sir Luther puts a hand on his chest and again shows gratitude to Locust Traman for his help. He says it is only because of his help that they will return to their family's side. Locust Traman says he is glad that he helped them. He waves to them and says he hopes their journey will be enjoyable. Sonia Aqua Reed runs toward him and holds his arm. Locust Traman asks what she is doing. She says she will return his favor. He smiles and says that there is no need to do that. He says they need to help each other to live and to survive. Sir Luther asks him to allow them to help. He says the Aqua Reed house would lose their face if they sent them like this. Locust Traman scratches his head and looks at Isabel. Isabel smiles to see him. He asks the Aqua Reeds to buy him dinner. He says he knows about a place that sells extremely delicious sausages. They covered the distance and reach the place to have their dinner. They enter the place. Sonia Aqua Reed covers her nose to avoid the smell. Sir Luther also does the same. She says it does not look like a place that would suit nobles to dine. The place is full of customers. All of them are busy having their dinner and chatting. Locust Traman smiles and says it is well known that dirty and run-down places like this make the best food. Sir Luther looks at him and tries to understand him. Sonia Aqua Reed asks him what he means by dirty and run-down places. Meanwhile, the older man arrives there. He holds dishes of food in his hands. He says the place is pretty decent. The old man winks and says he sees that they have returned alive. He says it is nice to see them again. Locust Traman smiles and moves close to the old man. He says there is one more person who has come alive. The old man opens his eyes to see the injured man standing with Isabel's support. The old man throws all the dishes to the floor. He asks the man if he is Kazan. The injured man also begins to cry to see the old man. The older man runs toward his son. Kazan calls his father. They dress up the wound of Kazan. The older man sits close to his son. Kazan also cries to see his father close to him. Locust Traman says they have done the emergency treatment. He says he needs to rest for a few days to get well. He tells his father that he was trying to help the mother and daughter and kept as a hostage. Kazan cries and calls his father. The old man tries to console his son. Locust Traman says he does not know how good of a mercenary his son is. He adds that he is not as bad of a man as he portrayed before. Kazan cries and says he has regretted it for the whole time. Kazan says he is sorry for yelling at him and for leaving him. The old man says it is fine now. He says it is enough for him that he has returned alive. Isabel smiles to see the father and son happy. She comes close to Locust Traman. She whispers in his ear and asks how he knows the man is the master's son. He says they look the same, especially from around the eyes. Isabel wonders if they look the same. Locust Traman smiles and says it looks like the drag of their team has some extraordinary magic healing. She says she is just asking to be sure. She asks him who that drag is. Locust Traman says she is the drag he is talking about. Isabel turns red with anger. He says anyway, they are planning to lodge here. He says, but it looks like the house is full. Sir Luther says there are so many customers. He adds it must be a good pub. Sir Luther says it is a pity, but they all must look for another place to stay. Locust Traman tells Sir Luther he is sorry to bring them here all the way long. He says even the sausages are detachable. The older man overhears their conversation. He shouts and asks all the other customers to get out of the place. He says they are close for today. Some of the customers get scared to hear his voice. The older man looks at the sitting customers and asks them if they have yet to listen to him. They are closed for today. One of the customers gets aggressive and asks the old man why he is closing so early today. The old man is the one who makes delicious here and he wants to close early today. He kicks some of the customers out of the pub. Some of the customers say this is unfair. The older man says he would not make them pay, so get out of this place. The old man evacuates the whole pub. He comes in front of Locust Traman and his companions. He asks them what they mean by full. He says the entire place is empty. They look at the empty pub. The old man says it looks like he will use his skills for the first time in a while. He says everything is prepared. He asks them to go and was themselves. He asks them to take their time and get fresh. Locust-Traman and Isabel look at each other. They seem happy to see the old man's way of showing gratitude. The night falls outside, and the moon illuminates the surroundings. The moonlight enters the pub through its windows. Sonia Aqua Reed feels relaxed taking a hot water bath. Soon, all of them are presented with a table full of freshly prepared hot food. Sir Luther and Sonai Aqua Reed become confused when they see a lot of food on the table. Locust-Traman fills his mouth with so many pieces of bread. He fills his mouth to the extent that he feels difficulty swallowing it. The old man turned back to see him and smiled to see his full mouth. Isabel seems embarrassed. Sonia Aqua Reed comes toward the dining hall. Locust-Traman sees her coming. He says she is finally here. He says he started eating without her. Sonia also notices his extremely filled mouth. She stops for a moment. He asks her if something is wrong. He asks her to sit. Locust-Traman asks Sonia Aqua Reed if she is fine. He says her face is a bit red. Sonia Aqua Reed says she is finally feeling human again after cleaning herself. Her foot gets folded in the shoe and she loses her balance. Locust-Traman holds and saves her from falling. Sonia Aqua Reed signs with pain. Locust-Traman notices her arm and asks where there are so many scars on her arm. She frees herself from him and tries to cover herself. He says her scars look cool. He says these are not scars, they are traces of effort. Sonia Aqua Reed looks at him to check if he is joking. Isabel laughs and says she thinks about it now. She says she heard that they are heading toward Cascow. She asks them what their final destination is. Sonia Aqua Reed tells her that they are heading toward Jun House. Isabel and Locust-Traman repeat the words Jun House in their mind and think about something. They think about the words of Lord Peruan Jun, who told them that his fiancée is the eldest daughter of the Aqua Reed family. Lord Peruan Jun told them that the Aqua Reed house was famous for its impressive household, which had birthed many knights. Locust-Traman realizes that she is the fiancée of Lord Peruan Jun. Isabel also repeats the words of the eldest daughter of the Aqua Reed family and realizes she is the one with whom Lord Peruan Jun is getting married. Sonia Aqua Reed feels shy. Sir Luther asks them if they are acquaintances of Lord Peruan Jun. Isabel tells him that Frey Blake and Lord Peruan Jun are trainees of the same academy. She tells him that they are friends. Isabel says they have heard about the engagement from him. Locust-Traman again fills his mouth with food and asks if Sonia is Lord Peruan Jun's fiancée. He closes his eyes for a moment. He says Lord Peruan Jun is a lucky bastard. The next morning, they packed their luggage and left the pub. Isabel tells Sonia that she hopes the rest of her life will be peaceful. Sonia Aqua Reed addresses Locust-Traman and asks him to visit Jun House when he finishes his work. Locust-Traman looks at her and says yeah, why not? Isabel looks at him and stops him for being rude. Sonia Aqua Reed smiles and says she will wait for them. Isabel says it is lucky to have some link with the nobles like Lady Sonia Aqua Reed. Locust-Traman says she is right to say that. Locust-Traman says that Bart Peruan must have used all the luck of his life to win a girl like Sonia Aqua Reed. She thinks she is thinking about him, not Lord Peruan Jun. She makes a bad face. He asks Isabel why she is making such a face. He asks her if she has swallowed a bug or something accidentally. She thinks how a playboy like him can be so dense. They reach a place and Locust-Traman says there it is. Isabel asks him what is there. There is a dark and gloomy place in front of them. He says this is Schweizer's dungeon. They look at the dungeon from a distance. Gigantic bats are flying around the tower-like building. Isabel looks at the dungeon and says the place is worthy of its name, Drake Mountain. He says the monsters at the top of the food chain are drakes. Isabel gets scared to hear this. She asks Locust-Traman if he says they must fight with these monsters there. Locust-Traman makes a punch of his hand and says how nice it would be if it were true. He seems ready to face all the dangers. Isabel looks down and frightened to see something horrifying. Locust-Traman also looks at the food mark of the drake. He says it appears the kind of the drakes are dozens of times bigger than these drakes. Isabel sits on the ground in the style of falling. She says this is impossible. She says she has never heard of drake this big. Locust-Traman asks her to get her thoughts together. He says they are in the Ospania Mountains. He adds it is a place where anything can happen. He says it is a living hell. He moves his hand and releases a magical aura. Isabel asks him what he is doing. He forms a circular magical formation in the air and pushes her aside. She moves backwards. Meanwhile, a gigantic-sized monster comes to notice. The beast takes a big tree out of the ground. Both Isabel and Locust Tramen jump back in the opposite direction. The beast has yet to come to Isabel's notice. She asks Locust Tramen if he has gone crazy. Meanwhile, she looks at the monster and says, "Oh, there is an ogre." She understands the reason behind Locust Tramen's action. She thinks he should have told her about this instead of doing that. Locust Tramen notices that the monster is bloodshot, red-skinned, and has 3 eyes. He says he is a mutant. He says it looks like the master was right to say that there are mutants who keep flooding in the mountains everywhere. A dangerous scenario like this seems amusing to him. The mutant moves toward Isabel and tries to attack her. Isabel gathers her strength and attacks the mutant. She forms a strong fire magic aura and releases it. She directs the forceful magical aura toward the mutant. The heavy flames of fire lash out. Then she forms a fireball and throws it onto the mutant. Locust Tramen looks at her fighting skills. He says she has become a lot stronger than he thinks. Heavy flames of fire and smoke can be seen everywhere around. Only the eye of the mutant can be